Hello, and welcome to the 2025 online Western North Carolina USTA Captains Meeting. Thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation and your willingness to serve or consider serving as captain. In this meeting, we will cover a brief overview of our local CTA organization, how the USTA League is structured, your role as a captain, and what is expected of you, resources that are available to you, rules and guidelines that you should be familiar with, and changes to our regulations for 2025 that may impact your team. My name is Jennifer Kersey, and along with Bevy Walker, I help coordinate the Western North Carolina USTA League. Bevy oversees the spring adult and fall combo leagues, while I handle the summer leagues, mixed doubles, tri-level, and singles. We're here to help, so don't hesitate to reach out to us when you need us. Bevy and I work under the umbrella of the Mountain League Community Tennis Association. Western North Carolina covers 16 different counties, many of which have their own active tennis associations. The Mountain League CTA was created as an umbrella organization to bring all of these together to run the USTA League program. The Mountain League CTA board includes representatives from all the active CTAs, which are highlighted in dark blue on this slide. The revenue generated from the leagues flows from the Mountain League CTA back into the local CTAs based on the participation from the different areas. Now let's take a quick look at how our league fits into the bigger USTA picture. USTA is a nationwide program where players compete at their skill level in different age groups. The country is split into 17 sections, and North Carolina is part of the southern section. The southern section includes 9 states, and it's the largest of all the sections, making up about 25% of all USTA players. North Carolina itself is divided into 14 different areas, and Western North Carolina is one of the largest. If your team wins locally, you will get to represent Western North Carolina at the state championships and compete against other local winners from across North Carolina. Have you ever wondered why the 65 and over spring league is over before you even have a chance to break in those new shoes? Well, the USTA sets the championship dates from the top down. First, Nationals, then the Southern section, then North Carolina State, and finally, us at the local level in Western North Carolina. That means that some leagues have tighter schedules based on those deadlines. In Western North Carolina, we face an extra challenge since many of our facilities don't open until April. We do our best to juggle facility availability with the league calendar to ensure that teams get a full and competitive season whenever possible. So let's talk about your role as a captain. Captains are the heart of the USTA League. Without you, none of this would happen. We realize being captain is a lot sometimes, and we thank you for everything that you do and want you to know that we are always here to help you when you need us. So, what makes a great captain? We believe that being a successful captain comes down to 4 key elements. The first is the philosophy. Before you start, you need to know what kind of team you want to lead. Are you aiming for a competitive squad with dreams of nationals? Or do you want a team that's all about having fun and seeing how things unfold? Whatever your vision, be upfront about it. Not everyone may agree with your approach, but at least they'll know what the plan is. Second, hold a preseason meeting. This is where you can communicate that philosophy and make sure your team is all on the same page. Third, be super organized. A great captain makes life easier for the team by planning ahead. Get everyone's availability early, create your lineups in advance, including any backups, and map out at least half the season if possible. This gives players time to plan around matches and reduces last minute chaos. And last, over communicate. A captain who keeps players in the dark is a captain that's headed for trouble. Keep your team informed about everything: matches, practices, clinics, weather updates, rescheduling. Let them know before they have to ask. When your players trust that you'll always keep them in the loop, they'll be more engaged and committed to the team. Now let's dive into the key things you need to do as a captain. Number one, read the local regulations. We know rule books aren't exactly thrilling, but they're important. The USTA makes changes at higher levels, and those updates trickle down to us. Even if you've been a captain for years, things change, so don't assume you already know it all. You don't have to memorize every detail, but at least know where to find the information that when you need it. The latest local regulations are on our website and will also be emailed to you in your captain's welcome email. You can also check out the Captain's Handbook. This is kind of like the Cliff Notes version of everything that we're covering today in the local regulations. You can download it from our website and keep it handy in your tennis bag. Next, visit the Captain's Corner on our website. It's packed with helpful info to guide you through the season. We'll go over some of it in more detail soon, but it's a great first stop for any questions that you have. Bevy and I will do our best to be available, but most answers can be found on the website 24/7, and you don't have to wait to hear back from us. If you're short on players, now is the time to reach out to us. We have a large list of players who are looking for teams, and we would love to match them up with you. It's important that you stay in the loop by reading your emails. Captains, we know your inbox is busy, but please read all emails from us. They're packed with important information that helps keep the season running smoothly. After team registration closes, we will start working on tentative schedules. These will be sent to you in an email with key details about your season. The schedule is considered tentative because at the same time we're sending it to you, we're sending it out to the facilities for approval. Once we've resolved any conflicts with the facilities, a final schedule will be published in TennisLink. Once you receive your tentative schedule, share it with your team and start gathering people's availability, especially for those first few matches. Also, check for conflicts. Look for any matches scheduled on holidays or other tricky dates, and if needed, start planning for backups or alternative arrangements. If you haven't already, host and have that team meeting. You can also start exploring the team management tool in TennisLink, although be aware that until the schedule is published in TennisLink, you will not see it in there. Let's talk about some of the resources that are available to you. We do send a lot of information to you by email, and we know that finding an old email is not always easy. That's why most of what we have can also be found on our website, wnctennis.com. At the top of the page, the second tab is Adult USTA, and the first item under that is the Captain and Players Corner. Click on that. The Captain and Players Corner is divided into 4 sections. On the left, you'll see the calendar for the year, as well as the days of play for the leagues each season, and a link to the state championship sites. Under the player resources, there's information about NTRP, Tennis Link refunds, the mobile app, and more. Under Captain's resources, you'll find a link to the Captain's Handbook, this presentation, some commonly asked questions, information on navigating Tennis Link, how to make score corrections, the grievance process, and more. And finally, on the far right, you'll find all our official rules and regulations, from the local to the national level, as well as a link to the Friend of Court and the Code, which are the rules we follow when playing our matches. The team management tool in TennisLink is designed to keep you organized and improve communication with your players and fellow captains. As a captain, you'll have access to features your players may not see. So let's walk through how to use it. First, there are 3 ways to get to the team management. Under the My Quick Links, look for the New Team Management button. There's also a big blue arrow next to your teams. You can click on that. Or in the match calendar, select on any of your teams, and that will take you to the team management. On the match calendar view, you will be able to see all of your matches in a calendar format, which is super handy, especially if you're playing on multiple teams. Click on any match or your team name to open the team details page. The team details page is where you can view team standings and your roster. You can also add a co-captain here. You can manage player availability. Players can either mark themselves as available, not available, or unsure, but you can adjust that too. You can also control visibility. You can decide whether or not players can see each other's availability or if only you as captain can see everybody's availability. There's also tools in the team management app for communication to allow you to send emails or texts. You can select certain players to send them to, send it to a lineup for a certain match, or to the entire team. You can also send communications to opposing captains or to your league coordinators. You can use the system to set up alerts to remind players to update their availability or to send automatic lineup confirmations. For each match, you can see the details of the match, the facility where it's going to be played, whether it's home or away, how to get directions to the facility. You can edit and view your lineup, print your scorecard, and enter your scores. After you've decided on your lineup, you need to publish it in order to send it by email or text to your team. Until a match has been played, you can always edit the match lineup if changes need to be made. And be aware that when you publish something, that doesn't mean that it goes to the opponent. It simply allows you to share it with the rest of your team. While we know it is tempting to have everything digitalized and not use paper anymore, we highly recommend that you print your scorecards and bring a paper scorecard to every match. Here's why. First, it avoids lineup mistakes. The scorecard lists all registered players on both teams, and so that helps prevent errors when you're reporting your results. Second, you can actually pre-fill your lineup in the team management thing before you print it, so your players will all be on there already. It helps to make just swapping scorecards easier. When it's time, you and your opponent just swap papers, you fill in your players' names, and then hand them back. I know that some captains will actually print out all their scorecards for the entire season and keep them in a folder in their tennis bag. This is great, but be aware that players can be added throughout the season. So it may be if you print them out early that a player is on a team even though they're not showing on your scorecard if you printed it earlier. The captain of the winning team is responsible for entering the match scores. Here's what you need to know. First, update your lineup if you need to reflect who actually played in the match and then publish it. Once you do that, the players' names from the published lineup will autofill onto the scorecard. The opposing team's players won't automatically appear, so be sure you enter them correctly. If you ever have a problem with entering the scores, say you put in the wrong person or you put in the wrong score or whatnot, all you need to do is to email Bevy or myself and copy the opposing captain, and we will help you to make corrections. However, this needs to be done as soon as possible after the match. I also want to briefly mention the Tennis Link app that you can have on your phone. This is a great resource for all players, and while it doesn't offer as many features or give you as much data as the team management tool on Tennis Link, it has some super useful functions. It gives you quick access to schedules, standings, and scores, and you can actually enter your scores on the app. So it may be that you and the opposing captain just want to do that on the court before you leave, and that way you can confer and make sure you're in agreement on the scores. When we asked captains what they wanted to see in this meeting, by far the biggest thing that we heard was rescheduling and guidelines on that. So let's go into that. When can you reschedule? If you and the other captain mutually agree, you can always play a match or a line before the scheduled date or at a different time on the original match date. Playing the match after the scheduled date is only allowed under certain circumstances, such as inclement weather, issues at a facility, conflicts for the championship or local tournament, and holiday conflicts. We'll get into all of these situations more in just a minute, but first, let's discuss something we all want to avoid: full team defaults. For a match to be valid, the majority of the courts must be played. That means at least 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 5. If a team can't field the majority of courts, it results in a full team default, and the opposing team is awarded the win. If neither team can field enough courts, it becomes a double full team default. It's important to note that full team defaults cannot benefit either team when it comes to standings. And because of this, standings in Tennis Link may not always be accurate. At the end of the season, if there has been a full team default, the coordinator is going to have to review the standings manually and determine if the default affected the standings. If the standings are affected, all the matches involving the defaulting team may be removed from that round. If a team has 2 or more team defaults, all of their matches may be removed from the standings, and they may also face a grievance. So if you are having trouble fielding the lines and having a valid match, please reach out to us to see if we can get you some more players on your team. Okay, so now that we've talked about what makes a valid match, let's go back to talking about rescheduling. Playing lines early. What do you need to know? First and foremost, all the lines of a match should be played together whenever possible. Playing all the lines on the same date keeps things simple and promotes team unity. But sometimes playing a line early is necessary in order to avoid a full team default. That's the main reason that you should be looking at playing lines early. Captains are not required to agree to early play. And when a captain says they can't, that's not poor sportsmanship. If you're requesting to play early, remember that the other captain may accommodate you if it benefits their team. Players want to play, and if it means playing early versus not playing at all, they may say yes. And if they don't, that's okay. The only time you should really get upset about not playing lines early is if it means that it's going to be a full team default. Otherwise, just let it go and pray for rain, because if it rains that night of the match, you'll have a 2 week window to make up those lines. In any case, if both captains can agree to play the line early, just make sure that it's documented in a text or an email. And once you agree on a new date, that date becomes the official match time for that line or for the match, whatever is being played early. All right, let's talk next about championship and local tournament conflicts. This has been updated for 2025, so be sure to check the local regulations for all the details. Here's the big picture. Whether or not you can reschedule a match depends on how many players on your roster are affected. At least 1/3 of your roster must be impacted. For example, if you have 15 players, at least 5 people must be participating in the tournament to request a reschedule. Furthermore, the number of lines that can be rescheduled is dependent on the number of players that are affected. So if you have 3 players that are impacted, you could reschedule up to 2 doubles lines or 3 singles lines. If you had 5 players that were impacted, you could reschedule an entire match of 3 doubles lines. It's important to review the local regulations to find out which tournament events and championships are covered by this policy. If your team qualifies and you want to reschedule a line or a match, you must contact the opposing captain at least 1 week before the scheduled match and copy the local league coordinator. Next up, holiday conflicts. We do our best to avoid scheduling matches on major holidays, but sometimes it happens. So, what do you do if your match falls on a regulation listed holiday? You and your opposing captain can reschedule either the entire match or individual lines using the 2 week inclement weather guidelines. You should give each other at least 1 week's notice if you plan to reschedule. We want to point out that while we allow this in our regulations, we strongly encourage teams to play as many lines as possible on the scheduled holiday date. Rescheduling just to wait for your best players isn't the right play. It makes things harder for everyone, and we all know how hard it is to get court reservations. Courts are already reserved on the holiday, so do your best to make it work. Communicate early and keep the season running smoothly. So, what happens if bad weather hits after your match has started? Either captain can decide to stop play if they believe the conditions are unsafe, whether it's due to rain or darkness from unlit courts. If it rains, players should wait on site for up to 30 minutes to see if conditions are going to improve, unless both captains agree that it's going to be unplayable. Keep track of everything. Write it all down. Who was playing, what the score was, what side everybody was on, the service order, and the exact point where the play stopped. When you resume play, you must pick up right where you left off. Player substitutions are only allowed if play had not started on the court, meaning you were still in the warm ups when the rain started. And those substitutes must be players who weren't on the original scorecard. If play has not started, matches should not be called off for inclement weather until both captains agree that the courts will be unplayable at match time. Travel times should be considered in rescheduling due to the size of our league area. Captains, you must communicate with each other. If you text, do not assume your text was received unless you get a reply. You need to call if you didn't get a response. Someone may be driving. Second, if a facility closes their courts for any reason, you can reschedule. So let's talk about your options when it comes to rescheduling. Your first option is to set one makeup date. This is the simplest option. Both captains agree on a new date for the entire match to be played at once. The second option is to schedule individual courts. Captains can schedule each line separately, working around players' availability. The key here, do not exchange players' names in advance. This helps keep things fair and flexible. Once captains exchange names in a scorecard, substitutions are limited. You can only swap in a player who wasn't originally listed on the scorecard. So, again, we recommend you refrain from exchanging players' names and scorecards until you are physically on the court ready to play. Also, please note that some facilities may have restrictions because of court availability. They may require you to play the whole match at one time, or they may require you to play it line by line because they just don't have the courts available to allow you to play the entire match at one time. If you, as captain, are not available to make the arrangements for each line, you can assign an acting captain for each line who may or may not be playing. All right, captains, let's talk about how long you have to make those matches up. You have 14 days from the scheduled match date to complete your makeup, or before the season ends, whichever comes first. So don't procrastinate. What if Mother Nature strikes again on your makeup date? No worries. If your makeup date gets rained out, the 14-day clock resets, giving you another 2 weeks to try again. But again, matches must be played before the season ends. Let's talk about setting the makeup date. First things first, the home captain is in charge of coordinating the reschedule. And if the home captain can't, don't worry, they can assign an acting captain to take the reins. Now, to make sure we're not stuck playing calendar tag, the home captain needs to come up with at least 2 date options for the rescheduled match. And these options should be based on the availability of the facility, not when your best players can play. Giving 2 dates when a facility is available will give both teams a better chance to find something that works. Next, here's an important part. You need to come to an agreement on the new date within 4 days of the rainout. No pressure, right? Seriously, we want to make sure rescheduling is quick and efficient so everyone can get back to the game. So, what happens if captains can't agree on a date within those 4 days? The match is automatically set for the last Friday in the reschedule window at the original match time. If the courts are not available on the last Friday, the local league coordinator can step in and assign a different location for the match so that nobody gets left without a court. Please note, failure to complete the assigned match results in a double default where both teams are defaulted for the match. A few last things on rescheduling. Reserving courts is a responsibility of the captains. If you move a court early, be sure to cancel the original reservation and make reservations for any new courts that you need. Again, refrain from giving out your lineup until you are physically on the court. Finally, indoor courts. If indoor courts are available, we encourage teams to use them to avoid having to reschedule a match. And with indoor courts, cost sharing is encouraged so that no one feels like they're bearing the whole burden. However, please note, if one team is willing to pick up the cost, the other team is obligated to play indoors if the courts are within 20 minutes of the home facility and available within 30 minutes of the scheduled match time. Now let's talk about some other situations you may encounter during the season. Earlier, we emphasized that we want to avoid defaults. No one likes showing up to a match only to find out it's a forfeit. So let's dive into how we can prevent that. First off, encourage your players to arrive early. We know it's tempting to roll in just in time for a match, but showing up early helps avoid those last minute rushes and ensures everything goes smoothly. Now let's talk about the 15-minute default rule. This means that if a player isn't on the court ready to receive a ball by 15 minutes after the scheduled match time, the line is considered a default. And that's right, a match you've been waiting for and suddenly it's over. Not the way we want to start things off. If you have flexibility at your facility and captains both agree, you may mutually decide to move the start for a line that is running late. Maybe there's traffic or someone's got a flat tire or some kind of circumstance happens, but both teams really want to play. Captains can mutually decide that we are going to start the time and move it from there. So maybe the match was scheduled at 6 and they agree that that one line is going to start at 6:30. Whatever captains agree upon, that new time becomes the new match time, and the 15-minute default rule starts from that time. So what happens if a player isn't on site when match time rolls around? First, remember that your court reservations are typically for 90 minutes, so holding up the entire lineup waiting for one player isn't ideal. We recommend that captains go ahead and exchange scorecards and start playing with the available players. If the missing player shows up before the 15-minute default window ends, no worries. They can jump right in, play on their assigned court, and it's as if nothing happened. Simple as that. Now, if the player arrives after the 15-minute default time and captains did not agree to a later start, it's time to mark the default on the scorecard. In this case, remember that defaults have always got to be marked for the lowest court. So, say your number one singles player was running late and you started the match without them. If you end up defaulting, they actually will be defaulting the second singles line, and the people you had playing on your second singles line will be reported as the first singles line. Your second option, which we do not recommend, is to hold your lineup until the end of the 15-minute window and then rearrange your lineup as needed in order to have the default on the lowest line. Remember, you can always substitute a missing player with an eligible player who is on site and ready to play, but not on your original scorecard. Just make sure the substitution is made before the 15-minute default time runs out. If you have teammates that are coming to watch, encourage them to come dressed to play, just in case. You never know. There may be an injury during warm up or something unexpected happens with someone. If you can substitute a player to avoid a default, it's a win for everybody. Now let's talk about staggered matches. They're especially common in the spring when our courts are in high demand. If you see staggered noted on your schedule, here's what that means. A staggered match happens when there aren't enough courts for all of your lines to play at once. For example, if you have a 5 court match but only 3 courts are available, you'll start by playing your 2 singles lines and 1 doubles line, and then as soon as one of the courts finishes, the remaining 2 doubles lines will get started. 3 court matches may also be staggered when a facility only has 2 courts, in which case the first 2 courts will begin and then the last one will follow once one finishes. Here's the important rule. Your entire team must be on site when the match starts unless both captains mutually agree that the staggered courts will start up to 1 hour late. If you decide to do this, be sure to get the other captain's agreement in writing, either by text or email, to avoid any confusion later on. So, in short, staggered matches help us to fit everybody in, and with a little flexibility and clear communication, they do run smoothly. Just make sure everyone knows the plan and keep things organized. Let's talk about the exciting road to the state championships. It's important to discuss how your team can advance right from the start of the season. Here's what you need to know to make sure your players are qualified and ready to go. First off, make sure all your players are qualified by playing the minimum number of matches required in the regulations. This ensures everyone's good to go when it comes time to advance. Second, there are a few ways that your team can advance to the state championship. If you finish first in the flight, you're in. If you finish second, but the first place team declines the invitation, then you get the spot. If you are in a flight that has a playoff, the winner will get the invitation and the second place team will be the backup. If you're in a one-team flight, you will either move forward through a direct advance or by completing a required qualifying event. And finally, there's a wild card route. Wild cards are drawn by the state at the start of the season and posted on the North Carolina tennis website. If a team from another area can't attend, the wild card list determines who gets the invitation to take their place. Local playoffs. They're an exciting part of the season, but when do they happen and how does it all work? Here's the breakdown. Local playoffs come into play if you're in a flight with a large number of teams. In this case, the flight might be subdivided into 2 smaller flights, with the winners from each flight facing off in a local playoff to determine who advances to the state championships. Another reason you might find yourself in a local playoff is if you're in a flight where not all teams play each other an equal number of times. For example, let's say you play everybody once and then you have extra matches against certain teams. Sometimes we use this format to give you more matches during the season when we can't fit in a full second round. In either case, if your flight involves a local playoff, you will be informed about it right from the start of the season. You'll know exactly when the local playoff is happening and what the dates are. There are no surprises. Here's something to keep in mind. Having a local playoff means your time window to complete regular matches is a bit shorter. So if you're behind on makeup matches, it's crucial to get them played in time before the local playoff date. Local playoffs are typically scheduled at a neutral site, but if both teams agree and there are available courts, the match can be moved to a location that works better for both teams. Flexibility is always key. Last, make sure all your players in the local playoff are eligible for the state championships. They must have the minimum number of matches required for the state championship before they step on the court for the local playoff. So, local playoffs are all about making sure our best teams advance, and we've got the details covered from the start of the season. So, stay on top of your matches and your makeups, know the dates of the playoff, and get ready for some exciting competition. Let's dive into some of the major regulation changes for 2025. Here's what you need to know. First up, the maximum roster size for the 40 and over divisions at the 3-0, 3-5, 4-0, and 4-5 NTRP levels will now be 17 players. All other levels stay at 15 players. Why? Well, the state championship format for all these levels will include 4 doubles and 1 singles match, which requires a minimum of 9 players. This larger roster gives teams more flexibility to ensure they have enough players available to compete at state. However, just to clarify, our local format will remain at 3 doubles due to court availability issues here in Western North Carolina. Next, because of the increased number of courts per match, the 40 and over state championships will now take place at 2 different locations. The men's competition will be held in Hickory, and the women's competition will be held in Winston-Salem. Moving on, there's a new fee for medical NTRP appeals. From now on, there will be a $100 filing fee for these appeals. Just something to keep in mind if you're thinking about submitting one. Next, let's talk about rescheduling. We've already touched on this, but to recap, if captains can't agree on a new match date during the reschedule window, the match will be automatically set to the last Friday of that window. So make sure to find a time that works for everyone before it comes to that. We also already touched on the change regarding championship and tournament conflicts. The ability to reschedule will now depend on the number of players affected in relation to the team size and the number of lines being played. Lastly, another important reminder, full team defaults cannot benefit either team. That means there is no advantage to either side if a team defaults entirely. Let's move on to sportsmanship. Captains, you are the leaders of your teams, and as leaders, your decisions should always be guided by sportsmanship. Remember, the player promise is a great reminder that our matches are unofficiated, and for everything to run smoothly, it's everyone's responsibility to keep the true spirit of sportsmanship alive. To help with this, make sure you're familiar with the Friend at Court, which outlines the rules players should follow while they are on the court. We'll send you a link to this guide and we encourage you to share it with your players. It's a simple way to keep the game fair and enjoyable for everyone. Also, let's remember to show extra patience and encouragement to our newer and younger players. They may not know all the ins and outs of the game just yet, and it's up to us to create a welcoming environment where they feel comfortable and excited to continue playing in USTA League tennis. So let's lead by example. Remember, first and foremost, you set the tone for your team, and it's important to keep sportsmanship front and center, not just on the court, but off of it too. Remember, sportsmanship isn't just for the players, it applies to everyone players, spectators, pros, It's important to keep the environment friendly and respectful at all times. Profanity and equipment abuse are never acceptable, even if it's not directed at another player. We want to maintain a positive and respectful atmosphere, and that starts with avoiding any kind of negative behavior. Captains, part of your role is to step in and de escalate when things get heated. Remind your players this is a recreational league. It's meant for fun and friendly competition. Let's keep it lighthearted and supportive. By setting the right example, you're not only helping your team, but ensuring a great experience for everyone involved. Let's keep sportsmanship at the forefront and make this a league where everyone enjoys playing and has a positive experience. Together, we can make this season great for all players. Thank you for being a USTA League captain. And remember, if there's anything that you need, we are here to support you. Have a great day.